what happened from the time that you and I were sitting here and determining the pose and everything else, and talking about the Phil sculpture. I told you that I think I could do it.
Right.
And then the next thing I knew, you had $3,000 in a GoFundMe payment. So what happened in between that time?
Well, I just thought that I saw your small statue that you did of Phil, and it just really inspired me. And I thought we should have a statue of Phil, right? And I reached out to the community, and people were just so generous and so excited.
How much did you end up raising total?
I think we raised around $10,000. You had a lot of help to get Phil on board. I know he was a little hesitant.
Took help.
But he was very proud. We had a camera installed. You know, the Pocket Park will never be the same without Phil, right?
This is going to last for a long, long time.
Yep.
But we're not sure about this because it's new material. So we're looking at doing him in bronze.
I think that would be exciting to have, you know, his face and hands in bronze, and the rest of him just as Phil would always dress.
People ask me that a number of times, why did you leave him white and all this? You know, I said, well, if I did him in a normal way, he would just be like every other bronze statue in the world. And I wanted it to be more like his spirit, still here in the park.
Once people understand that,
right? It's a period of time for them to get used to that.
Yeah, the community stepped up, and it was just a great festive when we dedicated it. I mean, thank goodness he was still here to celebrate that.
Phil refused 3 times to let me do his sculpture, at least 3 times to let me measure him. And you were influential in talking him into it. How did that come to be?
Phil was very street smart. It was nothing personal about you, it's just he didn't know you that well, and you know, to go over to your house and, you know, do what for what.
He wasn't sure what I was going to do.
He had no idea. I had met Phil through Sue Kensington putting a Facebook post about this guy needs help, and everybody knew who Phil was. And so I thought, well, heck, I'm retired, I can pick him up at his home and drive him downtown. So I was sharing my excitement about knowing this guy with you, and that's where you segued in. Well, hey, I've been trying to get a statue, and made it, Phil.
And it was a little statue, just that's all I wanted to do, a little statue. We did the little statue, and then they wanted a big statue. And I went, oh my gosh, this is a whole different ballgame now.
You know, when I'd go over to pick him up at his place, even when it was 10 below zero, he'd be standing outside 5 or 10 or 15 minutes early waiting to go downtown. He couldn't wait
Anxious to get downtown. I think part of that was because he was so loved. He just wanted to be there to be loved as much as possible. He didn't know about the process or anything.
Nor did I.
I didn't even know.
You know, you're taking, you know, measurements, you know, crown to nose tip and all your measurements and doing his hands, and so I felt he was kind of patient because he realized that just like the plaque for Citizen of the Year, that this was moving toward even a more permanent recognition of our local orphan who did well and who inspired people with his friendly face and banter.
Just look at Peter and smile. Okay, good, great.
Yeah.
How am I looking?
Not for shit.
That's good. I need a good profile. A real good profile.
Taking your picture.
I'm not retired at all. I'm going to die first, then I'll retire.
Oh, then you retire after you kick off.
After I die, sure.
You still talking to the man upstairs then, get an extension?
No, he hasn't called any. Friday night I gotta go for a fish fry.
With Lilani.
Yeah, that's very important.
So how's that Lilani? Is she behaving herself?
Yeah, she's going to a birthday party today.
Okay.
Getting her hair done. Yeah.
Okay. Good. You've been over to see the work they're doing on the orphanage, your old home?
That don't concern me one thing.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Phil's hat. It's got wonderful detail in it. In fact, I'm bring it up real close so you can see that. Got some pretty cool little lines on there, and I want to capture those if I can. So it's going to require that I use a material that's going to be able to get that kind of detail. This is moulage. This is all ground up. This has actually been used before. It can be used over and over again. It's a rubber-like material. It's like really wet rubber is what it feels like. And it's real flexible once it's cooled down, and it'll make an impression of whatever it's up against. And it doesn't stick to anything. This will be like this at room temperature or even at body temperature, 98.6, but just over that. And this is moulage in a double boiler. And this is what you want it to look like. It's almost creamy like. And this is ready to go. This is what I'm going to be putting on. So you can see the thickness of it. So I'll just be pouring this over the top of Phil's hat, all over. He would scream if he saw me doing this, because I have to give his hat back to him. Now if you're going to be doing a human body, this is pretty much what it would look like, because the temperature would be warm enough for the person to tolerate the temperature. About 120 degrees. You can put it on your skin without too much trouble. Amazingly, this stuff literally does not stick to anything. Okay, here are the results of the casting of Phil's hat. This is what I'm trying to achieve, is to get that hat. Break apart the mold, which is a now I know it's not going to come out perfect everywhere. You can see it's picked up a lot of the really nice details in there. There's a few imperfections I'll have to grind down, make up for that flaw there. Now, the next thing I'm going to do then is I can use this now to make a latex mold of this pattern. And then I can go back over some of these areas, like in here, grind this away, and grind this away as well. And then with that latex mold material, when I put the fresh epoxy on here, while it's still fresh, I can wet the latex mold and lay it right on there, and it will capture that pattern in the threads, and it'll obliterate that because it'll just blend right in very nicely. And so you see that little spiral there where it radiates off from center point? Well, that's the center of his hat right there. So now I can just lay this on top of the fresh latex after wetting this down a little bit, and then you just tap this down nice and evenly without putting too much pressure on, and just very lightly tapping it. And then when you peel it away, it'll have all of that will be over here as well. And then you just kind of match up your patterns and match up the lines of the striation, because they all kind of go to a center point. So you can see the pattern of the hat weave in the mold there. So that's how well it renders it. So that's a good, this is a polygem material. So this is the molten moulage. I popped it in a microwave for about, I don't know, 40 seconds or so, and then you go back in and you do it again. And then I add a little bit of water to it this time, just because I want it to be so it pours well. This is a little thinner than moulage normally goes, but I want to go deep into the fabric and stuff and gain as much impression as I can. So here's how you do an impression of Phil's tie. So I just pour this stuff on, boom, and I'll let that set. There, you can see some impression there. Let's say, in this case, a sock. And that's going to be the cuff of his arms right here. This is to give me an impression so I can actually stamp in threads and everything else to the shoes to make them look more realistic. Part of a sweater. First I'm going to take this epoxy and a certain amount of it. Got it to the right amount that I want it. I'm going to use this template. This is the polar fleece. I'll put that on here and then press, just like it's a press mold. Put a little water on my fingers and it'll push in very easily. You can just slide it along and force it into all of that impression area. You see what's going on here? So I've got a nice little square. I'll just go right to the edge. You want to push pretty good in there. Make sure it's going into all those little pores and pockets and crevices and everything else, because you know it's hard to get polar fleece. That's a tough impression to get, but using this method makes it possible. First I'm making these struts. First I punch these holes and then drill them out, and I'm going to cut out these circles, and you see those little half circles there? Well, those are going to be notches that are going to hold this 1/4 inch rod. So that's going to get welded into that notch, and that's going to form the outline of Phil's leg. In this drawing you can see where those struts are going to go. That's why some of them are drilled off center and then some are drilled in the center, and there's reasons, and that's where they are positioned. Here is the finished skeleton of Phil. All of this has to allow consideration for the mesh, the concrete, and a 1/2 inch thickness of epoxy. Mistakes at this point. Everything has to be perfect, because from this point, once it's filled with the foam, you can't make any more changes after that. You don't want to make a mistake at this stage in the game. Project at the stage of foaming. Now that the welding is all completed, where the cavity is going to be filled with an expandable foam. That tape actually arrests the foam or somewhat encapsulates it. Foam here is called great stuff. This is the stuff I'm using. Oops. There we go, right there. And you hold the can upside down to squirt it, and I'm going to be squirting it into all of those cracks and crevices. Now I filled this with airbags. It's just basically shipping stuffing and stuff like that. Really, it's just to save on the foam, because all I'm looking for here is a shell. So now Phil is ready for his next layer of foam. That's going to fill in all these kind of voids in here. And all this is going to get covered with a steel mesh. Here's some right here. I'm using sections right now, and then they're being sewn in here where I actually take a needle. You know, I'll hold it with a spike like that. Once I get it wrapped, that acts like a third hand. Curved needles like this to get to hook around a bar like this so I can drive it through. The metal lath is sewn to the body. Actually sewn quite tightly to the body, as you can see here. It's actually, you can see it's stitched together. You gotta get on the underside too. the finish layer where the epoxy is on it, because all those crumbly bits are going to get right in your way all the time. So you want to get them off. This is how you do it. These things will wreak havoc with later layers when you're trying to do texturing and stuff like that. Those little crumbly bits will get in the way. So I'm going to knock most of them off now. Then I'm going to spray this on with a hose and make sure I got everything off as much as I can before I do the epoxy, because one little crumbly bit means you can't do fine texture. Fills the ring. Looks like it's a pretty good impression so far. I don't see many flaws in it. Looks like it's holding his hand properly inside the mold. He wasn't wiggling around at all. So looks like it's going to be a pretty good casting. Now this moulage material now, I can grind this back up again in a food processor and grind it up into little tiny chunks and reuse it over and over again. I'll just start grinding this all away and then cupping the hand here, so grinding some of this away, and then this is actually going to be laying on Phil's lap. So that's why I've got it. I had his hand kind of in a cupped shape while it was sitting on his lap, and then just put a piece of tin foil under his hand, and with the help of Peter Zenti, I was able to keep Phil awake long enough for this stuff to set up. Because it takes about maybe about 15 minutes for the moulage to cool down. And then once the moulage has cooled down, it firms up. Then I tell Phil to wiggle his hands as best he can. And then it'll start releasing inside the mold and stuff, and then slowly pull Phil's hands out of the mold so as to not destroy any aspect of it. This looks like it's going to be a really good casting to work with. It's a keeper. Better be, because I had to destroy the mold to get it out. Now it's time to do the shoe. Now I'm going to take my permastone. Usually I would use plaster on this, but it has to have some kind of an encasement over this that will hold that shape so that I can remove it from the shoe, and then the underside is what I want. You got to build a shell around that, so I did that with permastone. And I use permastone because I know that permastone sets up fast. But anyway, this is what that mold looks like. Here's one here for 1 foot. So you can see the impression it made. It's actually a pretty good impression. And then here's the other foot. So now that all that's popped out of there and I've made a positive of that, this is what it looks like. So now, save me the time of sculpting. So now, all I got to do is fill the gaps and follow the pattern, and I should have a nice looking shoe after the epoxy is all set up and done. Here's Phil's shoes. They're not completely done yet. I've sanded off all the rough spots. I'm going to put things like that texturing back in. I want to capture that if I can. These are various tools that I use with the epoxy. I just use these shims and modify them. This into kind of a knife shape. Actually, this is the most common tool that I use. And in this, actually, I modified it and it looks kind of like stitching. So I get equal amounts of epoxy into each hand. I will dip my hands into water, go into the powder, touch the powder pretty good, reach into the water again. I go directly into the epoxy. This is the powder thickener. One of these is the epoxy, the other is a resin. So it's a two-part, equal part measure. You do not want to contaminate one or the other, so you have to keep them separate. So whatever I do with this hand in drawing out an amount that I need, I will draw up an equal amount with this hand, and they only need to be approximate. Kind of approximately the same amount. Now I can mix them together. So when I blend them together, and I want to do it kind of like bread dough, you're just mixing back and forth. What that powder does now is it starts to thicken it. So at this point in the game, I have extreme elasticity with this. And I get really super detail if I wanted to. See, now I got the epoxy where I want it. I've mixed it enough. It's got enough elasticity where it has breakage like this. Now this would be really great for the ends of tree branches that are broken off and stuff like that. I got it to the point where it does, you can hear that suction, but it's not sticking to your hands. So that's pretty much where my determining point is. I'm ready to start peeling off bits of this and start putting it on. I built the collar of the shirt where you can have a tie here and that's going to come down. This is built up already because the epoxy has to be a ½ inch thick. Here you can see I got part of a sweater on. It's just kind of laid in here right now. This is just a strip that I molded and then cast. Pressing in the epoxy. You just keep working it, and let the epoxy cure overnight underwater, and then took it out of the mold, and it's still pretty flexible, so I can get it to go around contours. Now this is going to get back buttered with the fresh epoxy. So now that's ready to go, and that'll stick readily to that area I prepared. Now the way I made these sweater edges like this is I made a mold of an actual old sweater. Since the moulage is water-based, this doesn't stick to it, and so you can peel it right off and get a direct impression of the sweater. And then the tie I just sculpted in and then texturized.
Jonathan, thanks for that. To sponsor 1 hour of Best Week Jazz at the moment, special offer is $200 for an hour of Best Week Jazz. So you get a lot of buck.
Here's Phil's finished hand. Changed some contours here so it fits on top of Phil's knee. What I don't want is any space between here and Phil's knee, because that could allow this to fracture if someone sat on it. Next step here is I got to figure out how to get this part angled such that it will go into the recess that's prepared for the sleeve. So this can fit in there, and then the hand will rest on the knee properly. And nothing can happen to it if someone sits on it. This is a head that I bought that I ground down to account for the thickness of the clay. And then start taking some dimensions, like from here to here. You ever notice those catacombs in Europe stuff, and you notice those thousands and thousands of skulls and stuff all stacked in there? They all look alike. Although he looks different in just about every photograph you see him here. The shape of his head is still a skull inside. So every head starts out basically the same. I'm using plastilina to make, this is the first time I'm using this type. It's medium, it's a bit stiff. It's firm, very firm, hard to work with. So what I do is I turn my oven down to around 170 degrees. And at 170 degrees, what it does is softens this so it's pretty easy to work. You would never be able to do this right off the block. But you notice the line here kind of outlines his face pretty well. So I'm trying to capture that line to start off with. Then I know I have a baseline from which to start. So now what I'm doing is I'm just working on symmetry by rotating this around and having a light up here from behind and a light from the side. I can see the contours real well. I can go in and reproduce the dimensions. All this is a factor, and once I get all of that done, then I know that I have a baseline and I know it's accurate and it's symmetrical. And then you start building muscularity and the skin and the shape of the smile and all that after that. Hold that smile. Smile broadly. Your face is going to weaken. Big smile. Changes your chin line. Okay, smile broadly. Okay, smile. 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 Very good. Okay, pick your head up and smile. Tilt your head back a little, full smile. Okay, Phil, we're done. tin foil based. It's an adhesive backed foil, top and bottom on the inside. Now you notice this gap right under there, and then there's a gap right under there. Well, I don't want that gap there. I'm gonna fill this cavity with Celluclay. What I'm doing here is I'm building a bridge that is going to separate this sculpture into 4 quadrants. I want one quadrant here, the plaster that I can peel away in this direction and it'll be free. And then I want another one back from here, back, that I can pull away this way and down to release it. Now we got to deal with a lot of contours, and that gets to be a problem. So here's how I go about doing that. Here's a piece of foil back tape. I'm gonna get this stuff here. So you bend this in half, and then you squeeze it together, keeping it separated, but pinching it together about down to a 1/2 inch or so. And then you snip it with a pair of scissors down to about that 1/2 inch mark here. At various places, it doesn't really matter. There's no gauge. And what this does then is allows you to bend around contours. And then once I got around all the contours, then I can take more continuous pieces, larger pieces, and attach them here, knowing that everything is going to be tight to the form, because I don't want any gaps or anything like that. So this tape has to fit snugly everywhere on the face. So this is a part where you got to be kind of careful what you're doing, especially at this stage. To be able to interlock one piece with another piece, make a little slit right down along that one edge, and then you can bring that in over the next piece so that there's a good overlap. And then just work your pieces in tightly. Close this off flush with this surface. And then I can just box this in on both sides, and then I can pour this half. Once it's set up, I turn the whole piece over and pour the other side in 2 pours to do 4 quadrants. Mold is ready. So the actual latex mold was pretty flexible. It was all floppy in there, and so I couldn't get it to stick. So what I did was I took Vaseline and I rubbed the whole inside of the outer casing mold with the retainer part. That's all held together with rubber bands and straps, and it's in 4 parts, as you can see. So now I'm going to pour down on that bottom first, get that solidified and locked in place, and then I'm going to do the front part there, where I'm going to put the plaster in and work it into all those grooves and cracks. Make sure I get a good impression from the mold. So you can see the inside there, what it looks like. This is a reverse image of what's going on. There's the ear, the ears. The ears are the trouble spots, because there's all kinds of little indentations and stuff. So it looks pretty good. So here we go. We're ready to find out.
came out.
You have to know that where you're standing here, this is the official Phil Niemisto Pocket Park. Earlier this year, the city voted and decided to dedicate this park and name it for Phil for all the work he's done. Represented as our first public art that the city is officially going to be doing. We're very proud to have it.
This really was a community effort. I mean, this community came together and raised funds so quickly. This project came together so quickly for you, Phil. And you know, our goal was to raise $10,000. We raised just shy of $14,000. This really is a gift, I think, from the community to the community.
This is what started it all. Now, if I ever say to anyone, yeah, we can do a life-size sculpture of Phil, just slap me across the face. I didn't realize what I was getting into. And it was a 3-month project, and it took me every bit of that. So I'd like to thank Phil for being Phil. And for coming over to my house and trying to sit, because Phil had a hard time staying awake for our sittings, because they take a long time. You can't do anything like this without having a lot of help, so I'd like to thank my good friend Peter Zenti for talking Phil into letting me do this sculpture, which led to the larger one. And because Phil refused 3 times on the street to let me do it. Also, I'd like to thank Mona Lang, especially. She's been the executive director of the Downtown Development Authority now for 19 years. So nothing has been done in this town unless Mona is involved in that. For that reason, I'm going to donate this to Mona. So, I'm out of words.
Art is very important. Arts and cultural programming is very important to residents in the city of Marquette. The city believes in art and cultural programming, but I'm going to get out of the way here because it's basically the time of the moment that everybody has been waiting for. But thanks for your support of public art in Marquette, and let's do this. What do you say? What do you think?
A round of applause for the dedication and unveiling of